Welcome back to Pixels and Pints. It's an up-late episode this week, fortnight, month, depending on when I edit it, I guess. Joining me tonight, as always, is Tom.
Hello!
And Dan.
Hello.
And tonight we're going to be covering Dune Part 2, our structured movie review. Tom has a knife. I don't know why.
May yours chip and shatter.
It'll all become relevant in a minute.
Sand. We've got lots of sand. So we're going to be covering off our review of Dune Part 2. We figured it was, these up-late episodes are a lot shorter and more to the point, single topic. We're going to review a extremely high ABV beer, except for Dan, who is not drinking.
Yeah, I am. I'm having my first beer in 3 weeks. My second beer in 3 weeks, I should say.
Naughty. Cool.
Congratulations.
Shall we start with?
I hope you enjoy it immensely.
I am. I couldn't wait for you guys to hit. I couldn't wait for Pete to hit the record button to start it, so I cracked it open.
Fair enough. Shall we start with the beer reviews?
I am just pouring mine.
I have no review, so I'm just going to say I'm having another Samba Sour from Sunday Road. Passion fruit sour. Nice.
Did you review that previously? Is that why?
In the last one.
What was it? Sorry?
The Samba passion fruit sour from Sunday Road.
Thank you.
The room smells like burning because I got to play with fire.
My cat's breath smells like cat food. Shall I go first then, Tom, if you're still in the process of...
I have poured, but yes, you go first.
Okay. All right. I have Brick Lane Brewing's Taken Imperial Stock Ale. Yeah. 10.8%. What was the laugh for, Dan?
You didn't say it. You were reading the can, but Tom took a sniff of his beer, and I think the alcohol went straight to his head.
I could probably light the top of this glass on fire with my fire that I have.
I'm drinking this in the wrong order. So this is part 2 of the Trilogy of Fear for 2023, which we typically review in our Christmas special, but didn't this year because reasons. I don't know. We had too many fucking beers. We would have been falling off the chair by that stage.
Christmas was cancelled.
This is fan-fucking-tastic. I don't know what it is. It tastes like a strong ale. It looks like a strong ale. Like it's a really. It looks redder on this screen, but it's a dark reddish amber. It's listed as an Imperial Stock Ale, so I'm sure you can tell us what that style actually means.
Nope.
Dan?
No fucking idea.
They've made that one up.
Yep. It looks like a wee heavy or something.
Well, I've got to say, it tastes like a strong ale, but it's a little too dark, really, because strong ales are typically quite amber, like a lighter amber. What's it say on the can? Wake to silent blackness, trapped by a slow dream. Yeah, okay, it's not going to fucking help me. It's really interesting, actually. It tastes like a strong ale, so it has a solid malt body. There's no hop character there at all that I can detect. It is boozy, but not in a burning kind of way. It's more in the flavor, and it's quite candy. It's not just sweet. It's a candy taste with the sweetness. And it's balanced against the ABV really fucking well. I'm not gonna sit on it so much as I'm just interested to see how it goes as it warms up, because it's a fucking spectacular beer as it is.
Yep. Go.
You go, mate. You go.
Oh, just saying. I just looked up the wee heavy, and that kind of says everything that you said. So yeah, it's a strong ale, wee heavy of sorts. Yeah.
I looked up stock ale, and it said it's one of 3 related traditional British strong fruity ales, the other being old ale and barley wine.
Yeah, okay. So it's definitely. Look, it's an ale. It's a medium crystal malt color is what I'm getting out of it. So yeah, look, I'm gonna give it a fucking 5 because it is really, really good. It's a shame that we didn't get to share it, actually, because I think you guys really would have gotten a kick out of it too. So that's my beer review.
Excellent. I'm having the other version of, I think the last beer I did is for up late. I'm having another Boat Rocker Ramjet, which I found in the bottom of my fridge. Again, this is a whiskey barrel-aged imperial stout. I did have to melt the wax off, hence why I was playing with fire and had a knife. It did have you can kind of see it. It's got a stamp in the label, which is kind of like a cool little touch.
Cool. Like a little crest.
Yeah.
Or a seal, rather.
Yeah, so I don't...
They've dipped their
very rude.
They've dipped their imperial ring into the wax. Very
well. There's nothing on the crown seal. The crown seal is flat as a tack. So yes, they definitely did punch the top of it with the phantom ring.
Nothing wrong with dipping your ring in the wax.
Nothing wrong with that at all. So yes, they've used Starward whiskey barrels again. I'm ignoring you.
I broke Dan.
That's not hard. Did say it's a 2017 version and said it would sell well up to 5 years. Obviously, as Dan and some other people might have seen when I first cracked it and took a whiff of it, it was just alcohol straight up the nostrils. So that was it was a nice, really strong boozy flavor. It's actually quite delightful and sipping worthy at the moment. It's smooth as all hell. I wouldn't say it's got a kind of sweetness to it, but I'd say more like cacao than chocolatey. It's not like milk chocolatey kind of thing. It's that dark chocolate,
that bitter chocolate.
Yeah. It's very, very enjoyable. You can definitely feel the warmth of that whiskey coming through. It's the back of my mouth. It's kind of it's giving that warming sensation you have from a nice dram. I might sit on this before I review it because it has been in the fridge. It's ice cold, so I'm going to let it warm up a bit and hopefully some more of those flavors come out. So at the end I'll chuck a review in score wise, but otherwise I'm so far first couple of sips, very much enjoying it. Looking forward to getting through the whole thing. Nice. It's for those playing at home. Sorry, it is 13.6%.
Okay, it's definitely not the. I'm going to have to find. This is the problem with the fucking Ramjets.
I'll find it for you, and I'll link it for you.
Yeah, I just went to the Roger Ramjet 2017, and it's a vintage of Roger Ramjet 2018. And it's unless you got a fucking flux capacitor lying around, I doubt it. So
Roger Ramjet, he's our man, defending our sweet nation,
fighting for our
nation. Yeah, something like
fighting for our freedom.
Yeah,
flies in and out of space, not to join him, but to beat him. I don't know. When you actually listen to the words, they don't make a whole lot of sense.
That's America.
It's been an 80s writer strike that we didn't know about.
Anyway, so what's he got to do with Dune 2, the Dunening?
The Dunening. Such a bad name that we're going to stick with it.
Yeah.
So we're going to do this structured. We're actually going to act like the professionals that we aren't. So we'll start with story, and is this going to be full spoilers? You should never go full spoilers.
We always said these were going to be full spoilers. So
yeah,
full spoilers.
Okay.
You have been warned.
Yes,
yeah,
and
if you haven't seen it, you need to see it.
If you haven't seen it by the time this episode comes out, then this is your full warning to go and see the film. Stop, pause what you're listening to, and go watch Frenchie McFrench's new masterpiece. Yeah.
And I gotta say, as much as I give that guy shit, and I still think he's a fucking wanker for the stuff that he says outside of the cinema, I very carefully, it's the only time I've ever taken any real notice on the technology stack in a cinema. I specifically wanted to see this movie with an Atmos surround sound because I knew that you'd have a lot of overhead sounds and a lot of movement in the soundscape. And Jesus Christ, was I right in terms of predicting that it would contribute to my enjoyment of the film. The soundscape was fucking spectacular, and feeling it move around, I kept feeling like someone was grabbing the back of my chair to the point, and I was only one back from the very back of the cinema, and to the point where I half turned around a couple of times to have a go at the guy kicking my chair, and there was no one behind me. So there was enough vibration of air in the room that it was the cushion, the air-filled cushion that's supposed to sit behind your head. It was only just lightly making contact, and it was vibrating enough that it felt like someone was touching my chair.
Sure, it wasn't a young couple that didn't want to use the sex bed down the front of the cinema?
No, they were next to me. No, they were next to me. The dude next to me literally got a hand job while I was watching the movie.
She found his sandworm.
You were waiting on that, weren't you, Tom? There's been at least a week waiting for that joke.
A week?
But it's like, but the guy was in his 30s. Like, seriously, man. Like, if you haven't developed self-control by that stage. Anyway, yeah. So, story. Let's go with that. Sorry.
See, I was going to try and make a joke that this is the time that I admit to Peter that I snuck into the session he was in and was just slightly blowing on the back of his ear during the whole film. But then, yeah, he had someone was getting jerked off next to him, so there's no point. It's ruined my thing. So that guy, fuck you. You ruined my joke. Had a perfect setup.
Story. What do we think? I mean, Tom hated the movie. That's what we've been told so far.
Whoa. I never said I hated it. I never said. Actually, Dan can attest to this. I actually said some nice things about it in our little private chat as soon as I saw it. Thank you very much. I never said I hated it.
I like Orange. It was nice.
I didn't fucking like Orange. I can tell you that much. I thought, what was the funniest? Look, I know that the book's written in the 60s. It's the heyday of that science fiction era. And I don't know how else he could have done it. But the thing that made me laugh about, and this is jumping right to the end of the story, the thing that really made me like chuckle was just the obviousness of, well, I'm going to be a bad guy now, so I'm going to wear a black cloak and I'm going to put my hood up. But for the rest of the film, I had a white cloak and it was kind of hood down. I just thought it was the weirdest choice for the rest of the film of how like kind of.
You're talking Paul Atreides, right?
Yes, Paul. When he suddenly came back and he was like, well, I'm going to be the bad guy
as opposed
now.
to the start of Return of the Jedi where Luke Skywalker suddenly decided to be a badass and he turns up in a fucking
I know.
Mandarin
I'm just saying
colored.
it's like it was the weirdly tropey for what the rest of the film was. It was just it made me laugh. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it was bad or so defensive for villains.
Was it potentially? Fuck that guy. Was it potential? Well, and so Dan is our resident expert on the Dune source material because he's the only one of the three of us that's bothered to read the book. I 100% intend to read it after watching that film, but maybe there's a source material reason. But the impression I got was that he spent most of the film hiding. He was essentially in camouflage a lot of the movie. I know he's still got the still suit underneath, but he was wearing a lot of sand-colored outfits and cloaks. Yeah. And then he got to a point where he didn't feel like he needed to hide anymore. And to me, that was what that was a symbol of. It was just like, here I am, motherfuckers. If you think you can take me, bring it on. And so that's how I interpreted that symbology. Whether it was intentional or not, I couldn't tell you.
I'd say it probably is because it does come out at that stage that Paul is still alive, and obviously they made that known within the movie with the Emperor talking to the Baron Harkonnen and them realizing, and so 3/4 of the book that they don't know who Muad'Dib is. They have an inkling, the Bene Gesserit and Arulan do have that conversation. Is what happens if Paul Atreides is still alive? It does come out at that final battle that's okay. I am here, and I am your worst nightmare.
Yeah. So obviously, when you're watching a film like this, and Dune Part 1's the same. You know that the storyline, unless the director fucks with the story too much, you know the storyline's going to be good, right? Like a fucking well-constructed story.
Actually, right on that. I enjoyed the story of 2. I was more engaged in the story of 2 much more than I was of the story of 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then when you think about it, and I went...
which I'm not sure if I was leading that into, I'm not sure if that's the same in the book. If obviously you got a lot of ground to set up in the first film of this kind of series like this, but I'm not sure if that's the same in the book. And it's kind of, is this one of the ones where it's weirdly split across 2 books or like a book and a half?
No, well, there's a time jump.
Yeah.
So in a time jump that they don't do in the movie. So we can basically work out the time frame from the start of Dune 1, Part 1 to the end of Dune Part 2, which has to be around 7 to 8 months because Jessica is pregnant with Alia at the start. We know that through conversations, and she hasn't had Alia at the end. So but she's heavily pregnant by the finale of Part 2. So we know it's 7 to 8 months. Within the book, there is a time jump. The first time period ends at the Jessica changing the water of life. So when she becomes the Reverend Mother for the Fremen, that is the cutoff. The Fremen have a big orgy at that point. And that is,
as you do,
and that is the
very nice.
that is the there's reasons to it, and it's all around that water of life side of it.
There's never not a reason for an orgy.
Yeah. Why not? Sure.
So that's the end of, I guess you could call it part one in the book, and then you do around a 2-year time jump. Paul and Chani have been together for that length of time. And they've had their first child together. So there is much more of a bond built between those two within the book because
But Tom Holland wouldn't sign off on that in the movie.
No. Well, they are part of the orgy as well. So that's their first encounter with each other very,
it's a fucking
very
paternity
early on.
test dramedy right there.
It's not. Yeah, it's our modern sick minds and Pornhub's version.
Yeah,
of
my modern sick
orgy.
mind's now picturing Spider-Man at a fucking Fremen orgy. You fucks.
It's more.
Oh, sorry, I got some on you.
It's more spoken of an ecstatic, kind of like the underground party in Matrix Revolutions.
Yeah,
Reloaded.
Yeah,
Reloaded.
Or
now I'm fucking picturing Spider-Man at that. Fuck.
So yeah, there is a defining time jump in the book, which you could define as part one, part two, and they kind of do that in the movies because it ends with Paul and Lady Jessica being taken by the Fremen into the desert. So that's kind of their symbolic way of saying here's the end of the first part of the story. The next part of the story is a Fremen focused story.
I have to admit, like I thoroughly enjoyed the story, but I expected to. It's a seminal classic science fiction work for a reason. If it was a shit book or a shit story, it wouldn't have its place in history the way that it does. But I have to admit that I was confused in the middle about the Reverend Mother and whether or not she continued to believe that Paul Atreides was the chosen one. I can't remember the quasi
which Reverend Mother, the Bene Gesserit one or Jessica?
Yes, Jessica.
Jessica. So
his actual mum.
the Lisan Al Gaib, the voice.
No, the quasi Gesserit, the one that
Kwisatz Haderach.
Yes, that's the one. Because she obviously believed that he was probably that in the first film. And then in the middle of the second film, I was starting to get the impression that she had decided that it wasn't him anymore. And it was the child that she was carrying. And I got a little bit, it might have just been because of the next to me. I don't know, because it was a little fucking annoying.
I honestly thought you were about to talk about the way they used the Fremen language when they did that thing when Javier Bardem was walking down the crevice. And I was like, well, why did that confuse you? They kind of had subtitles on.
No. I just couldn't.
You couldn't disassociate yourself from the
extracurricular activities happening next to you in the cinematic experience. Yeah.
I almost said something, but what do you say? And what do they respond with?
Need a hand?
Clearly there was already too many hands in that situation. Yes, I got a little confused in the middle because it felt like she was going crazy from the water of life, and she was talking to her unborn child, but not necessarily at the same time, because you know that the child's obviously going to be or have Bene Gesserit powers, and so the idea of a telepathic link was believable, particularly since Paul Atreides had that telepathic link at the end of the movie too in the dream. He spoke to his sister as a teenage girl. So clearly his mum wasn't going nuts all that time talking to it. But I kind of got a little confused in the middle as to whether or not she still believed that he was actually the chosen one, or if he was just playing a part for a while and she was basically manipulating the situation so that he played the part that he was supposed to play for her benefit.
Yeah, and it's definitely part of what goes in the book. Jessica played much more of a forward moving role in instilling that Paul as the Messiah for the Fremen. She doesn't play such an active role, and in parts they did actually kind of switch some of the things that they did from the movie to the book. So Paul was very against any kind of always is taking on this Messiah role. He's against it until he can't be against it anymore.
I thought that was brilliantly acted, by the way. The apprehension to be seen or held aloft as the Messiah, he played that perfectly all the way through.
Yeah, he definitely did. And like she doesn't usually in the book doesn't push and even to the point where it was a little bit evil saying we need to go for the weak ones first. They played her off as more of the witch Bene Gesserit, the evil side, and I guess through the whole thing they really, and it gets brought up several times, which is great, that the Lisan al Gaib is a Bene Gesserit plant. Like the Bene Gesserit have been instilled in the Fremen culture for thousands of years, laying this groundwork for their Messiah to come. And all of a sudden, she drinks the water of life, gets the awakening, the memories of all the previous Reverend Mothers, and falls into this. And they get referred to as witches all the time, the Bene Gesserit, because of their abilities that aren't understood by the general public. So she really falls into that semi-evil witch kind of character, which really plays out further in the book series as well, where Paul and Alia have a very stilted relationship with their mother for the things that she put them through. Even though you come from the first movie where she loves Leto, so she gave him a son rather than she went against her Bezrat Generate training, where they said you must have a daughter because we're not ready.
And that would be the mother of...
And that was that mother was then meant to
Quasimodo
breed with the Harkonnen, the Harkonnen heir, which was the male, and then together they would then have the Kwisatz Haderach, which was under Bene Gesserit control. As where Jessica pulls it a generation early and doesn't tell the Bene Gesserit.
And they don't have the control that they had hoped. And a lot of the scrambling from the Reverend Mother, the actual Reverend Mother, the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother, was about trying to regain control and make plans around Paul Atreides' death or assumed death, and it felt like she was trying to rescue a plan that had fallen apart, basically. Yeah. And you see that with Leia Seydoux. I think it was Leia's character that slept with...
Yeah, she slept with...
Yeah, Margot Fenrig. Lady Margot Fenrig, yeah. Yeah, so that also... Lady Margot Fenrig is married to Count Fenrig in the book, and the Harkonnen line ends with Feyd-Rautha. It doesn't get any further, but obviously they're looking for an antagonist for future movies. So they're playing that Margot Fenrig has the Harkonnen line is continuing. There is a mention of it in the book when she first sees Feyd-Rautha in the arena. She does actually say, has a mental thought saying, is this the line that we're meant to preserve? So there is a
precedent.
There is a precedent there. There is a nudge towards that she might have carried the Harkonnen heir, but it's that's never something it goes any further in the book. That it ends with them, and she's married to a count. So
I felt it was, because again I haven't read the book, right? So I don't know what elements that were in the book that Denis Villeneuve has kind of lent into to make a comment, but potentially about modern society, as opposed to what was a metaphor in the original content when Frank Herbert wrote the book. But I thought it was fascinating, the push-pull between fundamentalists, and that's a word that was used quite willy-nilly in the movie, and the concept of seeding a religion with a bullshit story in order to manipulate them. And I felt it was quite on the nose in terms of modern society, but it equally could have been quite on the nose in the 60s.
Yeah, they don't. From memory, he doesn't use the fundamentalist term at all in the book. It
But that could just be a modernization of the
yeah, definitely
the words.
Yeah, it's definitely alluded to with their fanaticism around Paul, and then towards the end, and especially in the next books. I mean, the next book is literally called Dune Messiah, and you get much more of an in-look to the Fedaykin, so the special forces within the Fremen, but you also get a very polarized view of those Fremen who didn't have these such radical ideas that Paul was, the Lisan al Gaib, and those that will absolutely blindly follow him to the end. And that actually comes to a very big head in Dune Messiah, with Paul right smack bang in the middle of these machinations by certain characters,
the crazies and the not crazies.
Yeah, and I mean, still the not crazies, I say in quotation marks, still do some very radical things in the name of their non-belief of him being the Messiah. So it's 100% spoken about. They don't use that fundamentalist term. I don't really remember I want to get it out in the open. I haven't said this yet. I think all bar 2 changes from the novel were expertly done. I thought they were absolute homages to what was written in the original text, with concessions of it needing to fit within a limited character to a 2 hours and 45 ending of a movie. Like they made expert choices in the way that they chose to tell the story. They chose to tell the story about certain characters and execute all the little bits and pieces, even down to the way that Paul stabs the Baron at the end was an homage to how he died in the book. It's not how he died in the book, but it is an homage to how he died in the book. And that was a 2-second thing on screen, and it was a clear choice of the Baron had to die. Alia, Paul's sister, wasn't there to kill the Baron with the Atreides Gom Jabbar stabbing him in the neck. So Paul stabs him in the neck with his knife,
with the Chris knife. Yeah.
So down to.
So what were the two? You implied that there were 2 changes that you didn't appreciate.
I understand why they did them. I just don't like that they did them this way. The first one was the use of the nukes, and having the idea of pointing nukes at the major spice fields to destroy them doesn't make sense to me, because they didn't have time, and they weren't able to touch on how the spice was created, which is through the infant
worm poo,
the worms. In the book, he uses converted water of life and has that suspended over either the water or the major spice fields. And basically what it does will just corrupt everything on the planet and kill the life cycle of the worms. So that's how he sets it up to destroy the spice. Destroying some fields of spice with some nukes doesn't make sense to me. But then they didn't have enough time to establish. They would have had to make the full major cuts elsewhere to establish that.
Yeah, I mean, I get it makes sense. It makes sense for the general film viewer to go and watch it, because you say you're going to fire some nukes at the spice fields and it's going to corrupt it forever, because you think of Chernobyl.
Yes.
And you think of a nuclear meltdown and how it.
Well, the way I saw it is more like oil. Every time I heard the word spice, I heard the word oil.
Which is what
you've got a very Middle Eastern theme throughout the entire movie. The music is set in the scale of Middle Eastern music for the score. Obviously, there's a lot of themes there. We won't go into the religion part of the themes that I think that it was probably designed to be a bit of a commentary on. So yeah, that's how I saw it. Is they were essentially threatening to blow up the oil fields.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what I mean. I understand why that was a choice to make it like that, because it was far easier. It took way less. It was talked about in a sentence rather than
and everyone got it straight
and
away.
everyone got it exactly. And the other change I really, really, really hated, and it actually made me dislike the movie for a day or so, was the way that Chani walked out at the end like a stroppy, heartbroken teenager.
Yeah.
She's Fedaykin. She says in there she's Fedaykin. You get this hardened woman through the whole thing, and the book literally ends with Jessica saying to Chani, history will remember us as wives. And it's you have done the right thing to be here and stand by Paul in his difficult choice to not marry you because he loves you to absolute death and has to choose the thing that is going to change the universe by saying to the emperor, I'm taking your daughter as a wife, and that makes me now the legitimate heir to the empire. You have no say about this. And he says to Arulin, you're nothing. You're a wife by name only. You have no power. You have no nothing. Chani is my partner. She is my wife. She is the mother of my child. This is how it is. You have nothing. And he's actually very harsh and hard on Arulin through both the end of Dune and Dune Messiah. And I just didn't like the way Chani walked out because it did disservice to her character in the book and did disservice to her character in the movie. But
well, yeah, as someone who has only seen the movie, I thought it was really weird that she didn't pick up on the plan.
Yeah,
that was the thing that threw me off. Like, and the mates that I went and saw it with, who have also not read the book, we all walked out. We're like, it seemed like a weird choice that Chani didn't pick up on that. Like, she didn't like. It was it wasn't a clever plan. Like, it was.
He literally
see-through.
said to her. He literally said to her in the lead up to declaring that he would take Princess Aurelian's hand, Arulin, her hand. I will love you forever, or I'll love you to the end of time, or something.
My last breath,
until my last breath.
Yeah. There was that recurring theme. So he told her what he was doing. He made it clear that this is. And then the other thing that really, I agree. Actually, it didn't leave a distaste in my mouth at the end of the movie, but it was out of character and it felt a little cheap. She is a hardened warrior, and the notion, if you look at depictions through history in fiction, mind you, of hardened warriors of mixed gender groups, sex within a group of warriors is quite a common. Not meaningless, but it doesn't have the same weight of meaning that our society currently applies to sex, or used to until about 20 years ago. And so it was a little unexpected that she would kind of just walk out just after that particular moment. But I want to hear, and no disrespect, Dan, I wanted to hear from Tom as to what his thoughts were, not knowing anything about the underlying
two seconds just on the end of that. I understand. Well, I don't understand, but the choice of making her walk out was, I think, leans back to also the time frame that they chose. After them developing a relationship and actually being together, they could have only been together for a couple of months. So you can kind of see, even though it's not within the character that they built up earlier, that she would have a very quick emotional reaction to the person that she loves saying, I'm going to marry somebody else, and not having been part of that house culture. She might not have seen it that way. I know I'm stretching and I'm clutching at straws here.
Well, actually, no. I was just going to say on that, if you're going down that line, which I do see exactly where you're coming from, it's not just the fact that he says, I'm going to marry this. It's more who he's becoming is what she's meant to be reacting to in the film sense.
Yeah.
It's more about him.
Well,
she's becoming a politician, not a warrior.
And leaning more into the fanaticism side of it, that she's...
Which had already pissed her off.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Like, they made that pretty
she had the
throughout.
shits in that. Yeah, you're right. She had the shits in the scene where they're inside the really, really, really big shed. Where they were doing the ritual and he challenged everyone. That was a cool moment. I think that was probably the emotional climax of the film, when he stood up and he used the water of life to talk specifically to individuals and their own personal history, and demonstrated through that he could see the future and he could see the past. I thought that was a very cool moment. There was, that was supposed to be the spine tingling moment.
See, I saw that as more of his mother's corruption seeping into him moment. I thought he was really manipulating the people he was trying to get behind him, using his mother's tactics rather than a Paul tactic. It was a Jessica tactic kind of thing. So I get what you're saying. It was brilliant moment, but it left. That was one of those moments that I was just like, I left that scene being like, ooh, I feel a bit like dirty hands, like little clammy moment. Like, yeah.
Let me ask a broad brush question,
yes.
Dan. Is Paul Atreides a good guy in the books in the grand scheme of things?
Well, it's funny you should say that. I was thinking about all this earlier, and this is not a happy ending movie. Like this doesn't really end well for anybody involved. Paul gets his revenge about destroying his family and his house. He unleashes a holy war on the galaxy. Millions of people die. And it's not until later on in Messiah where he really reflects on these things and has a really somber, I shouldn't have done that. Like, I did it for reasons, but
there were consequences.
There were incredible consequences to all of humankind because of the choices I made. But because he can see all paths to an extent, because he chooses not to see further at some points, he knew the paths. He was either to go this
the
path.
Alternatives were worse.
The alternatives for him and his line and his family were worse. Yeah, and the Fremen were worse as well. So to set the holy war loose on the universe or on the galaxy was the lesser of two evils, because
so he trolley carded. He did the 5 versus the 1.
He did. He definitely did. But he has to now live with the deaths of those untold billions of people through, not just through war, but it says it in the movie, through the famine that's caused through the war. Or he destroys the spice fields and sends them all back to basically the Middle Ages.
The Stone Age.
Yeah. Where they go back to a complete feudal system. The houses are faster than light travel doesn't exist anymore. It's sublight travel between planets. And all the houses go back to their own fiefdom, and they control their own little fief.
Their own little fief being a planet.
Yes.
Just
checking. The houses, yeah. What did we think of the romance? Was it believable between Timothy Chalamet and
I'm surprised they dwelt on it so much, to be honest. Like, I thought they'd really set it up in one, from what I remembered. Like, that it was really leading towards that. And then they did this whole kind of weird on-off again.
Courting, yeah.
Yeah, I thought they'd already, like, from memory, obviously I can't remember exactly things, but I thought that was covered in one. Or, like, the end of it kind of led to, like, there was, like, a bit of...
There was a spark there, but I think...
I guess for all our things of watching so many, like... space opera kind of things. Like, it was like when we see that spark, we're like, well, that's going to happen. Like, we could jump ahead and like skip through that. Well, I don't need to see the courting. We know it's going to happen.
I didn't mind the reasons for the hesitation, though. She saw this outsider. She really struggled to trust him to start with.
Yep.
It was exacerbated by the fact that you had these fanatics declaring that he was the Messiah.
Oh, yeah.
I actually think the thing that won her over was his stoicism to denying that he was the Messiah. I think that's ultimately what told her that he could be trusted, because you had this people that were prepared to just welcome him in and give him all of this power and authority over them, and he kept saying no. And I think that probably led to that trust more than anything else.
I definitely agree to a point, in that I actually felt that partway through Paul's delivering of that, no, I don't believe it, I actually started to hear more in the way Timothy Chalamet was delivering those lines, that he was starting to go, oh, maybe I am, like at that halfway point of the film, like, that he was still saying, like, going through the motions of saying, no, I'm not him. Like, he started to question his belief that he's not him and started listening more to his mum's saying and the other guy saying that, like, you are this guy. I don't know. There was like a slight voice inflection where he like maybe slowed down a beat and
I'm
saying,
not the Messiah.
Messiah, I am not.
I guess I got the impression he was starting to enjoy the attention.
Definitely. That scene where he does stand up in front of everyone, like, I didn't think Chalamet could pull that off. When I saw the grandeur of the scene, I didn't think he'd be able to actingly pull it off, but I was thoroughly impressed by the way he did it. And
you're really talking about in the big shed moment at the end?
Big cave where he yells at the dude and he goes really personal to that one warrior kind of thing. Yeah. I was super impressed with the way that Chalamet pulled that off for such a young actor. It held a certain gravitas that I didn't know he was capable of.
I agree.
We should maybe move the conversation into acting. So, what did we think of the lead acting? And so when I say lead, and I'm not the definer of shit, but to me, Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya are the two lead actors in this movie, or actor and actress. Were they believable? I mean,
before we get into that, I would like to throw out, which I threw out to Dan, I really found distracting halfway through the film the amount of really well-known actors that were brought into it as significant roles. Like, when Walken
it started to feel a bit Game of Thronesy a little bit.
Yeah, Game of Thronesy or Christopher Nolan-y, where it's just like, hey, I know who's the who's who right now in acting. I'm going to bring them in, and it almost kind of cheapened it for me. I guess because a lot of those guys have been in a lot of those Christopher Nolan films that are those like grand spectacles. It was like, oh, this is what you guys do now. You do the grand spectacles. But I was completely thrown off by Walken. I don't know if it's my, I've watched a lot of...
I was waiting for the fucking caricature of himself, to be honest.
I can't believe that this Paul Atreides has come in and he's leading the Fremen around. Yeah, like, it was, I don't know, it was a bit weird. He's got to watch up his ass. Anya Taylor-Joy really threw me.
Yeah,
and
me too.
I didn't... Again, it just felt like, yeah, you're in everything now, but this doesn't hold any weight kind of thing. That's just one thing I want to throw about the general casting.
I'll tell you what really fucked with me.
Really distracted me. Yeah.
Tell you what really fucked with me. Austin Butler, Fade Rother.
Rother, yeah, it did with Louise too. She said she couldn't stop seeing Elvis.
I'm yet to see Elvis.
No,
I really want to see Elvis, but I'm in the middle of watching him in Masters of the Sky, the new Band of Brothers series.
Yeah,
and he's one of the two major. Well, he's one of many main characters, but he's the two prominent characters.
Yeah,
and he's got hair and
eyebrows,
and eyebrows, and so vastly different as a character.
It's going to really probably annoy you guys, but I could not see him as the alien that drinks the weird water in Prometheus, the alien ripoff film.
Was he at the start of? Is that him at the start?
No, it's not him. No, but the way they did his makeup, his head looked weirdly jelly.
I was still getting over the fact that it wasn't Matt Smith.
Well, yeah, I could see that too.
The same sort of brow structure.
Yeah, no, I think I again super impressed. I go back to Sui's remark that I can't not see Willy Wonka when I look at Chalamet now.
Yeah, it was Willy Wonka versus Thanos. Really, that was the movie.
But that's the thing. I didn't see. I completely disassociated Chalamet from any other role I've seen him in. I thought he did a wonderful job, and like I said, I didn't think he'd be able to pull off some of those big scenes. Like, in terms of the timbre of his voice, it's quite light. It's quite airy almost. But the way he held that vocal capacity to yell like that, like, I was like, whoa. That scene when he turned around and told the Reverend Mother to shut the fuck up, I was like, I am instantly 6 to midnight. Like, yes, son, fuck, that was great. And like, if I watched, and like, obviously I know how much Star Wars is ripped off of Dune, but if you watch the scene where Luke Jedi mind tricked someone and just went, shut up, or silence, or whatever he says in that thing, you'd be like, oh, yes, sir, right away, sir. What happened again, sir? Like, yeah.
Would have been given shivers.
But that's the thing. I thought the way he carried himself was sensational for such a young actor.
And On that same scene as well, Tom. The foot stamp in front of Christopher Walken, in front of the Emperor, could have been taken if he'd done it in
to a caricature level.
It could have been like,
but why?
But it
I
wasn't.
want to be Emperor.
But there was no change in the facial expression.
Nah.
There was no movement in the upper body. There was no hesitation in it. It was fucking do it. This isn't a request. This is an order.
You know what it actually felt like? And look, it's very
the complete
racially
opposite
charged.
of Hayden Christensen.
It felt like he looked very much like Hayden Christensen. Let's not lie about it. It felt like he was like almost like curb stomping the Emperor. Like he was just like, I will smash your skull with my foot if I have to.
Yeah. Do it or this is going to get worse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which I think is sensational for him. He's had like the only other roles I've seen him in, it's just like he is like Wonka is obviously the most popular one that's come out recently, and it's like so different tonally to see him in this. But even going from Dune 1 to where he is now, I thought he carried himself so much better. Like
he's 29 as an actor.
Absolute baby in terms of most of the actors we've been watching in the last couple of years. They have definitely moved.
Well, considering how old everyone around him is, that the supporting cast.
Exactly. Yeah. No,
I thought they nailed
him. Yeah.
I thought they nailed casting, and I think that the actors themselves fucking nailed their roles too.
I don't agree. I really was distracted by some of the big names they pulled in, and I think it detracted from the film. Like, I liked Batista in the first one. I really didn't like Batista in this one. I don't think he carried that role as well as he did in the first one. Josh Brolin, I think for me, this is just for me. Like I felt like he phoned it in a little. I don't know. I want him to be a bit more burnt out and washed up than I think he put on. He was still a bit too royal for what had happened. I guess with the shortening of that time jump, maybe that makes more sense.
I don't know. I think I don't disagree with what you said about Josh Brolin. But I think Dave Bautista needed to fade into the background, and because the role needed him to fade into the background. He's a has-been. He failed. He needs to be gutter stomped, and ultimately he's being replaced with a guy who's physically a third his size. And so they needed to come up with a believable way to kind of push him out of the limelight and replace him with this much sleeker, more agile, nimble, fucking knife wielding murderer. And I think they did a decent job, because if he'd played it even keel, it wouldn't have been as believable that this scrawny little dude could have supplanted him essentially.
Oh, no, I think we're agreeing on the same point. I was actually thinking that Batista overacted it a little bit.
I know, but
as opposed to pushing him back to the.
But I think he had to overact it. He needed to be the petulant, replaced, chosen special, niece, nephew of.
Harkin.
I think,
he's the nephew. Yeah,
it was his uncle.
Floating Jabba the Hutt. Yeah.
So it's really interesting, because that is Raven. So Batista's character was Feyd-Rautha was going to replace Raven from the first. Oh God, I think it's within the first 50 pages of the book. Baron says Raven is just a tool. He is there to put down the Fremen and to get spice production back in line. He is not going to be the one that rules. The one that rules is my other nephew, my younger nephew, because he has the smarts and the wilds and the ruthlessness to do it cleverly, as where Batista was used as a battering ram. I think Batista played that. He's obviously a big, capable man, but he played that more simplistic, childlike, bowing down to the fear of the uncle, bowing down to the fear because he wasn't smart enough to see these other things working in the background,
the patterns.
Yeah. So I think
that's fair.
I think he was great.
I get what you mean. Yeah. I was going to say, I don't know if Austin Butler, he was psycho, but I don't know if he was. I probably would have liked him to push that a bit further. For the way they talked about
in
his
terms of being a ruthless politician as much as a ruthless
No,
physical
just pure,
presence.
pure psycho killer. Like the way they talked about him being a bit more like psychotic in the way.
But he needed to be believable as someone who could make the
like
political
not push him towards
maneuvers
like
too.
to like Joker level psycho kind of thing.
No,
I read this thing
he would
about
play a good Joker too. By the way, that actor.
yeah, I could see that. But no, like the way he talked about, because I read one of his interviews like post film coming out about how he's always been really method, and like when he did Elvis, he was talking as Elvis for weeks after filming, and he had to had to go see someone to be like, I need to stop, like a speech guy to be like, I need to stop talking like Elvis. It's freaking everybody out. And he was like, I know how bad this role I'm playing is. I'm pretty method. I need to hold back. And like, I can't be acting like Babe Ruth. Did I get that right?
Babe Ruth, yeah.
Babe Ruth. I can't be acting like him in my modern day-to-day life. Like I can't let this bleed into my offset kind of life, which I think is very good for a lot of method actors who don't do that and don't pull back from that edge sometimes. But I don't know if that, and this is a weird thing because I really don't think method acting's that great, but I don't know if that actually kind of made him pull back in some of his performances. I just thought he was like I think he could have pushed it just that little bit further in some of those scenes. Maybe that was a director's choice. Who knows? We'll maybe find out at a later stage, but yeah, that's just from me.
Okay. Do we want to move on to cinematography?
I think we need to just make a comment of Lady Jessica, Rebecca Ferguson, in her craziness role of talking to both Alia in her stomach, in her mind, as well as externally, and how well she portrayed that Reverend Mother character.
I think a great little offshoot thing they could do for Lady Jessica would be just Lady Jessica's like blog from inside the sandworm little pod. I think that'd be fascinating. I think that'd be so cool.
You're right though, Dan. I think she fucking nailed it. And look, everything she's been in recently, and she's been popping up all over the place recently. For me, she was the lead actress in The Silo.
Yes,
and the attention was
that
on
was
her.
It. Yeah, I remember you talking about that.
And she's been in a couple of other things recently as well. She fucking nails it every time.
She's great.
So
I was also very keen to see Florence Pugh's Emperor's Daughter take over more of a role. It really teased what is to come from Florence Pugh in that thing. I don't think she was like, obviously story-wise she didn't have enough to go on, but like there were times where you saw through like where she looked really frightened by things, but you could see in her eyes that she was just like, I'm telling you I'm frightened with the way I look, but I'm also plotting things in the background. Like I'm adapting to this as it happens kind of thing. I think it was like that quick-minded thing, like just the way that her face held in that. So especially if she's meant to come out more in what let's assume is going to be a third film. Like,
I would assume we'll get Messiah and children.
Well, hang on, but we've got a third part to the original story.
No, that's it. That's the Dune is done. That is the movie set. Part 2 ended where the book ends.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, we're on to Dune. We're on to Dune Messiah.
Because Denis already talking about if we can make this a trilogy, that would be an amazing feat. So when he said that, I kind of So when he said that, I kind of assumed that meant that it was a 3-part retelling of the original book. No. So obviously not.
No, it's Messiah. Yeah,
it's really bugging me, and I'm currently on IMDb looking up Game of Thrones because, what's her name? Leah Seydoux really threw me for a loop because she looks a lot like one of the actresses in Game of Thrones playing a role very similar to the role that Leah Seydoux played.
The one who marries the young
yes.
It's not Margot. It's not Margot.
She actually ended up marrying the prince.
Yes.
Lady
of the House of Flowers. She had the grandma, the boss ass grandma was the.
She's so fucking good. Tell her it was me.
Leah actually, on that Leah Seydoux. I don't know. It felt like she was playing another. That's when I said like felt like she was playing a Nolan role. Like I don't think that was some of her best work, to be honest. I think she's been it. But that could be what she was given. Like, don't get me wrong, it could have been the content.
Natalie
she was given.
Dormer is the actress I was thinking of. Yeah. Who plays Marjorie Tyrell.
Yeah, I don't know. As soon as Leah Seydoux's character came on, I was just like, it felt like one of those one of those characters that Nolan subs in. Like it's the sub in character. It's just like
she was the only character. She was the only actress that felt out of place for me, and it was just. And again, it's because it linked back to Game of Thrones.
Her and Walken definitely. Walken felt so out of place for me.
Yeah, me too.
But
yeah,
So the actress from Game of Thrones and Lea Seydoux' character were echoes of each other for me, where it was a case of, in order for us to have control of the men, we have to manipulate them, make them fall in love with us, fuck them to get
seduction role. Yeah,
fuck them to get their seed, and then we will control the world through our progeny. And it was just,
yeah, that was also pretty weak writing on Austin Butler's
when
character's part, where he was just like, I can see through your tricks, and then she just takes off the backless thing, and he goes, well, sorry, what were you saying? I'm interested now. Mayhaps we can deal.
But even the follow-up conversation with the Reverend Mother felt a little flimsy. It's okay, I've secured the seed. Really?
Yeah,
that was the conversation.
That's what I was saying before. Tom, you say that it felt like a sub-in character. It is a sub-in character. It's a sub-in part. Like it didn't exist. That extension of the role didn't exist in the book. So I'm not surprised that it felt like a sub-in because it literally was.
Literally was. Yeah.
Well, there you go. I've seen you through, Mr. Frenchy McFrench. I'm on to you.
Shall we move on to cinematography?
Yes.
Just conscious of time.
Yep.
I'm glad you're conscious of time because I feel it is a construct. That movie was very fucking bright. It was very fucking bright, and it hurt my eyes. And I was scared and alone and very frightened afterwards. No, I don't know. I understand the whole thing. Desert planet, everything, sparse thing. I don't know. Just compared to the first one, it's been a long time since I've walked out of a cinema and actually gone, holy shit! Like my eyes hurt from how bright that was. If you talk about cinematic experience, it really threw me off that it was just
very specific takeaway.
I don't know if it was just like, well, I think we had like more moments in Dune 1 where like your eyes got a chance to reset. So you went to the House Atreides planet and it was the lush greens, beautiful waters. That's that one scene that we all remember is the ship coming out of the water and just cascading off. Whereas this was just like, well, it's white sand and it's sunny. So like it's the one film, I think I actually said it to Dan, it's the one film that I really wish I didn't necessarily see.
You brought sunnies too?
No, I didn't necessarily see in 3D, but I wish I'd taken some of those 3D glasses that are like kind of sunnies, but not.
Just to
give them a rest. Yeah,
but
I don't know.
Do you not think that was a choice to represent?
No, I understand it's a choice. I'm not denying that it's a choice. I just wish Villeneuve had dialed it back a notch. I felt it was too much of a choice. I get it. I'm not in the desert, though. I'm in the comfort of a cinema seat for 2 hours and 45 fucking minutes, by the by. Like, don't burn out my retinas. Because
I didn't pick up on
well, maybe your 4K screen wasn't 4K enough.
I kind of see where Tom's coming from. I mean, you make a comparison to that like Fury Road, and Fury Road has that more dulled down orange desert tone. I guess Australian outback desert tone rather than the sands of Sahara, the bright white color. I see where he's coming from. And there's far fewer shots within buildings and things like that in this one.
There was no break. Even when you went to a different planet, you went to a stark black and white planet.
Yeah.
Those fireworks were fucking cool, though.
Those fireworks
was cool.
Yes.
Yeah. That whole black sun and the way that it changed the properties of light was really cool.
That was like, you got to credit from that. I may think he's Frenchy McFuck, but I'll give him credit for that.
To me, that was because I've fucked around in my photography days. I fucked around with UV film, and it very much felt like UV film. Like it's not just black and white. It's
Mad Max shot and that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's ultra contrast black and white. There's no gray. It's black or it's white, and that's quite different from traditional kind of black and white shots.
Yeah, those scenes of the people moving through like the podiums, pergolas, whatever you call it, and as they hit light, it's just the stark transition. It was very, very, very well done. You got it. Yes, 100% credit.
There is a black and white version of Mad Max too, Tom.
Yeah, there is.
It's called black and chrome.
Yeah, we've
I think we've
watched that.
talked about that. Yeah.
But I don't think it's. But imagine
it's not to that extent.
Yeah. Imagine on that extent though.
But I felt the cinematography overall, even shooting sand, I think it was expertly done.
There were less slow-mo sand shots.
Yeah, there was. There was much less.
But it felt very Middle Eastern, and I think that's the only way you could possibly go.
Were you
with
guys
that-
disappointed
with that
by
movie.
the lack of sandworms? There was only like 5 scenes with sandworms in it. Okay.
I felt disappointed
I'll
that
go
they
fuck
turned
myself.
into boogie boards really quickly. Like they didn't have that awesome power past the first scene where the 3 sandworms came out and they were like a force to be reckoned with. And the first movie, they were a destructive force.
I guess the end when they're all traveling on it like a bus, like just
But
Yeah,
they're on the
and it felt very
545 from-
blasé.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. They're a destructive force to the outsiders. To the Fremen, they're Shah Halud. They're their gods. They're their.
But there
their
was no
mode of-
reverence in it.
Their mode of transport. Their everything. Yes,
But that's my point.
That
It-
is one thing that was missing. Like that's that, and 2 other things that I haven't made
We're
comment
missing?
on
The
yet. That I think
cloaca?
we're missing. You're absolutely right. They didn't have the reverence for Shah Halud. The only time anybody within both movies has the little reverence for him is Dr. Kynes in the Thopter when the sand chews it up, and she has the little speech, which is coming in the going of the maker. I forget the words of it, but that's their respect for the maker, the spice creator, the god of our world, and they have the reverence for the Chris knife, which is a tooth of.
Yes.
The tooth of Shah Halud. So
Shah Halud, yeah.
But yes, I 100% agree. That reverence for the worm was definitely missing in this one.
Just like we're going to catch the 405 out the para. Like that's what it felt like.
Especially when the mother actually caught the baby one and was just like, well, here we go. Here's my, going to waddle out with this thing on and just pour some poison out of it. It just, I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, that scene felt janky. I couldn't put my finger on what I didn't like about it because it was the shorter statured lady carrying it from the sand arena to the water arena. It wrapped around her like a snake, but it just didn't have enough gravity for me or gravitas.
Felt a bit rubbery.
It just and not just the special effects. It wasn't just the special effects. It was also the sandworm didn't behave the way that I expected it to behave too. It didn't writhe. It didn't fight her. It just wrapped itself around her. It didn't squeeze. She didn't seem to be in any kind of discomfort. It was just
gave her the old Vulcan nerve pinch as soon as she grabbed it. Yeah.
It just didn't feel. It didn't feel like that was a baby god to me.
No, and that I think
felt
that's
like
where,
a really big snake.
Yeah, and that's where I think the lack of reverence kind of started because it's like that was meant to be a really seminal moment of like, oh, this is how we get this beautifully, deliciously blue poison.
Yeah,
that was a
great job of that.
beautiful blue, especially against the stark white yellow that had been for the rest of the film.
But it had to match the eye color.
Yes, no, and I think it was beautifully chosen. I think it really accentuated how important it was in the film because of that break of those monotonous colors. I
really dug the number 23 tattoos on the face too for the Reverend Mother.
Oh, yeah,
All
I
the
get what you
fucking
mean.
numbers.
Yeah. No, I actually said to Luke after we left that I was just like, it unfortunately really reminded me of like the PS3 era of games where everything was just like that mottled brown. Except this was just like a mottled yellow.
What you're talking about?
It was that. I think that was the thing that probably hurt my eyes for much. It was just too much of the same color palette.
Until
that blue though. That blue, I fucking chef's kiss.
I think it's a personal experience from or a personal it had a connection to personal experiences for me because I had a bit of a romantic fling with the Middle East for 4 or 5 years, I think maybe. I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East. Well, not a lot of time. I've spent some time in the Middle East.
Sounds like sounds like the beginning of Indiana Jones's biography. I had a romantic fling with the Middle East for 4 or 5 years. It's like, hello.
But I love the region and I love the culture.
Yeah, all the photos you took. Yeah, you took some fantastic photos too.
And it's funny because the day after I saw it, I went to that was Sunday. No, I saw it on Saturday.
Mhm.
Went to work on Monday. I have all of my favorite holiday photos cycling as my desktop background at work, just to remind me as to why the fuck I turn up to that place every day. It's to fund the next holiday, and it was one of my favorite panoramic shots of the deserts in Dubai, and the color. And it was shot at sunset, and the sun is the flaming globe on the horizon,
Yeah.
and it's this really dark orange yellow, and it matched the movie's themes, even though that shot was nothing like what they shot in the film. The cinematography for me was beautiful, but it kind of really evoked that same feeling for me watching the movie. The score, which we will talk about in a minute, really elicited that Middle Eastern theme a lot too, because it is in the same scale as Middle Eastern music for a lot of that film. So I'm going to go feed the cats while you guys talk about
The score. Well, actually, this is one of the first things I said to Dan when I talked about the score. I was just like, well, look, you can't deny Hans Zimmer's done it again. Like that was a brilliant score. There was like, I got a bit sick of the Dune, like that kind of thing. I was just like,
It's very Middle Eastern though.
But it also felt a bit Hollywood Middle Eastern. Like it felt a bit.
It absolutely was.
Yeah, I know, but like to the
you
point
have to connect the Western,
obviously,
Westernized
I get
audience.
that.
Right?
It was just like it felt a bit like a bit on the nose, but I
on
thought
the nose.
But also the way that he did that score, and I haven't gone back and listened to it, which I really should. I haven't done either a score, and I really want to go back and just listen to the score without watching the film, and just listen to the. I really want to listen to the sandworm like movement parts as well.
I listened to Dune Part 1's score on Sunday while I was working. That was good in the background.
Yeah.
But then Dune Part 1 had a lot more diversity in
which is why I want to go back to
location.
Dune Part 2 for its that one location.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, I'll be right back. Sorry.
Dan, your thoughts, please, if you will.
Yeah, no, I my thoughts on the score are exactly the same. I loved it. I thought it was perfectly timed for the big epic moments. It didn't overpower anything when it wasn't meant to overpower anything. So for those gentler, more quiet scenes of conversation and things like that, it was
reflective moments.
It settled into the background nicely without being obtrusive. And the big bombastic moments where the sandworms, the three sandworms, in the final push and the final attack, I thought it was all timed perfectly, and it did stand out at the time. But I think also the qualities of a good and great score is something that doesn't separate itself from what you're watching and what you're experiencing. So I think that it blended in so masterfully is a credit to all those involved.
Was there, and you might remember it better than me, was there a lack of score in the gladiator scene?
There may
or
have
not?
been, yeah.
Because I think that's a really clever thing that there's a lot of like famous film fight moments where you don't realize at the time, but they just pull out a score. My favorite one is Balin's tomb. Like the actual fight in Balin's tomb when the orcs run in, like they pull the score. There's no music.
Yeah.
It leads up to the orcs jumping through the door, and then it goes completely silent except for swords clanging, arrows flying, and troll roaring. And I feel like they did the same thing with I should have noted it down.
That's exactly what I'm pointing to. You can't remember. You can remember that the score was great, but you can't remember that there was where it was and where it wasn't, which makes me lean more to that wonderful overall filmmaking is they're not that they.
Well, it's that one of those things. There's absence of sound when you think about like. You think about life and you don't have music playing your entire day when you're walking through. It'd be great if I had a full score playing as I went through my day because it would be fantastic. But, oftentimes they're not. But it's when you have films like that have those, bombastic moments, as we say, and it's just, but to a complete lack of music to the point where you don't realize it, I think is really, that also adds to the cinematography of the scene.
Yeah.
I think that's like a really nice mirroring, blending marriage of score and shooting the scene. Fuck! I really wish I could remember that. Maybe Peter will remember when he comes back.
There's probably a quick little snippet of that fight scene on YouTube by now, so we'd probably be able to find out pretty quickly afterwards. But I mean, on that fight scene, I think all the choreography was excellent. I thought that fight between Fade Rotha and or Ralpha, whoever they say it, and Paul was excellent, as well as the arena, the gladiator fight. I thought that it leads into something I want to talk about when we get to costuming. And I guess it goes across all of the. Fuck it, I might as well go now. We can repeat it for
Just
Pete
go
when
now.
he comes in.
Peter will come back in. He'll understand what we're talking about. Yeah.
Everything had this otherworldly feel to it, but it was so familiar to us. Like, Dune is 10,000, set in 10,000 something, and that is our timeline. So it's our future, and it has this very familiar feel to it, but still otherworldly. The way that the anti-gravity belts worked for the Sardaukar, and that where it was a floating, but it was something we've seen astronauts do.
Yeah.
They have to get that momentum. It's like an anti-grav feel. The las guns weren't traditional pew pew that we've seen in other sci-fi. They felt otherworldly because they were a long extension laser rather than a bolt.
Well, a charge up rather than just a trigger pull.
Yeah, Giddy Prime was that otherworldly, but it had that harken. Sorry for the pun. Harken back to the gladiator fights of ancient Rome in the Colosseum. Like, everything felt otherworldly, and like things that and this leads into the costuming part I wanted to mention was the costuming was when you saw the Fremen walking around, they had very militaristic satchels and things like that. And there's at one point it's a front on view of Paul, and he's just got this buckle on the front of his satchel over the top of his cloak, and it's a very buckle that we recognize. But it's like, well, of course that buckle works. It's not something that's major. Why the fuck would it not exist in another 8,000 years' time? Like, it's functional. It works. It's not something that people would be devoting their time to re-engineering, because it's a buckle that holds so familiar but then otherworldly, because it's then attached to a still suit and all that sort of stuff.
And thinking about the house, like the house armor that people wore, like the House Atreides, like the Oscar Isaac's character in the first one, he felt like a real knight suit of armor. Like, it was very plate heavy. It was very like, it's layered and layered and layered. When you look at
big pauldrons,
but then you look at the armor that like the day-to-day kind of Harkonnen soldiers were wearing at the start of part 2. It's very astronauty, ties in with the anti-grav belts. But then you look at Batista and Butler as they're walking around as their characters, and it's very leather armory. It's very like, even though he's a big dude, he still wears very mobile armor, because it's just like, that's kind of the style they fight in, compared to Josh Brolin's character, who's still like, I'm still wearing pauldrons, but I'm now wearing like a weird smuggler version of it.
He was wearing a fucking Han Solo outfit is what he was wearing.
Well, I'm talking to the first to second kind of thing, yeah. But then you look at, and you think of Austin Butler, the character he plays. He was definitely wearing the rogue, like, stabber, like the thief kind of armor. It was almost like, you hate to say D&D, but a little bit D&D in terms of the way they think it, but it works. It makes sense. Paul was, he was a scout. There's nothing else to it. He was a scout, and he wore scout armor. Compared
his camouflage and everything that blends into his desert environment, and
whereas Javier Bardem's character was more of a heavy scout, so he wore a bit more armor because he's seen a bit more action. I think it was very, very clever costuming to just add those little elements into, it's I harken back to some of the best costuming I always do is Lord of the Rings, and it's just like they look like they should for the factions they're playing for.
Functional within their role. It's
actually putting some thought into everyone, like everyone around them's kind of thing. And then the Emperor's Guard, pure shining silver,
Sardaukar,
and the the otherworldly, and this kept rolling into my mind every time I saw something new within the film that did have that otherworldly element to it. Is the next book film, it starts to go a little buck wild with the weird shit. So they needed to make things feel grounded, but they needed to start introducing those, yes, you understand this, but you know what? There's some weird shit to come. So you need to feel like you don't quite understand their environment as well. And I think that was a bit portrayed with Giddy Prime and the black and white. Like you recognize it, but it's something you haven't seen before, because what you're about to see, that's some next level shit.
To me, it's a very random thought that probably ties into cinematography and costuming and story, to be honest. To me, the Fremen parallels to the Aiel in Wheel of Time was really interesting. Wheel of Time, there is a people that live in the Threefold Land, which is basically a nuclear desert, which you find out kind of middle of the way through the books that, you know, it's set in the future of Earth and there was a nuclear holocaust, and they basically live in the deserts that you would imagine Fallout being set in, really. And the reverence given to water and the waters of life, and you know, when people die, you draw the water out of the body and their soul goes into the well, those sorts of things, and to spit on the ground was a sign of great respect in the first movie. Really, to me, Robert Jordan stole a hell of a lot from the Fremen for Wheel of Time to depict the Aiel. And probably took it a step further in a good way. Probably kind of, like, to me, he kind of evolved that idea a little further. But the costuming, just tying it back to the point, the costuming for them was perfect. And it's exactly how I pictured the Aiel in the Wheel of Time series. They're in earth and tone, light, cotton kind of wraps in a lot of those scenes, and those cloaks looked very lightweight. They were camouflaged, but they weren't heavy. And then even when they had the dead wrapped in cotton, in white cotton, was very Islamic. To me, there was a lot of connection there, which goes back to the whole Middle Eastern tone. I thought the costuming was, because I came in late because I had to feed the fucking cats. I thought the costuming was fucking bang on all the way through. Yeah. Even the recurring theme of Paul Atreides' seal ring as a recurring symbol, and of costuming of it being a representation of him putting away who he used to be and then taking it back out towards the end of the film and reminding himself of who he needs to be, regardless of who he thinks he actually is.
Yeah. And that's
which is a stark contrast to his cloak color choice, which was very on the nose and a bit kind of eye-rolly. Yeah.
So it's funny you mentioned water, Pete. Like that was one of the two other things that I alluded to before that I don't.
You didn't like?
Well, no, not that I didn't like. I don't think they put enough emphasis on. They didn't put enough emphasis on the importance of the water. They spoke about it and they tried to give it some importance. But I mean, the Seachers are all sealed. They have moisture seals on the doors. Like we didn't see a moisture seal, and it would have.
No.
It would have. The Seachers were open. Like they were quite open to the elements, and they're not like that. Like they talk about Paul and Jessica for the first time walking into the Siege and the smell of people who are living in there in well, they don't wear still suits inside, but the sweat and the body odor because of the moisture needs to be trapped within, because any drop
would have been quite humid in there too.
Anything that's let out is wastage, and they don't waste water. They really talk about still suit etiquette and always wearing your mask and nose plug. They fucking never wore their masks in.
No, and they really didn't.
I get it, because portraying facial emotions, and
we talked about that when we were talking about Iron Man way back in the day,
and getting and emoting through a mask, and actors are vain and they don't want their faces covered either. But the still suit etiquette is one of the things that is like, that is really spoken about. And the
Halo,
The only other thing is, I had to ask Louise on the way home, what did she glean from? She doesn't know anything. She only knows what I fill in for external extra information was I said to it, I need an outside point of view on this. Did you understand the importance of spice in the universe?
You asked me the same question.
Yeah.
I think Louise and I had the same answer. Like,
No. Yeah, I didn't.
No.
She didn't get that how important the spice is.
The house breeding thing seemed more important than water and spice to me.
Yeah,
but yeah, if I go back to the 82 film,
Why?
82,
Why?
84?
the David
would
Lynch
you?
one. Yeah,
Why
Yeah.
would you?
Because very specifically, the one scene that they do not include in the new Dune Part 1 movie, that they did include in the original Dune movie, was the space gilder, who is a human who has been so corrupted by spice that he can see all possible futures and pasts and can translocate through the universe. And he's a disgusting fucking worm creature.
the Navigator.
And that gave gravity to how powerful spice can be because it has such an impossible physical effect on the human body. And this is a universe where there are lots of planets full of people, but they're actually none of them are aliens. They're all human. And they've just have a divergent evolutionary course.
So he doesn't even describe a navigator until Dune Messiah. And Paul and Leto actually have the conversation in the book when they're leaving Caladan, because Paul says, do you think we'll get to see a navigator? And Leto's like, no, they are a secret held behind the Spacing Guild. You'll get to see the front men of the Spacing Guild, and he talks about it, and he talks about the importance of actually not seeing the navigators. And that seemed a bit of a cop out, not a cop out, but it was one of those dodges by Frank Herbert saying, "Hey, this is how space travel works, but I don't know what this looks like yet."
What they look like yet.
And it's not until Messiah does he actually describe one in the tank of orange spice mist in the fish-like features that they have, and he then describes what you just said, they are an evolutionary arm of humanity.
I know we're not reviewing a second beer but I've got
Pete.
one.
You can, Pete, because
I'm
you've been
not
a very
gonna give
good
it a
boy,
full-
and you can review one.
I'm not going to give it a full review, but I've got to say this is an outstanding.
Just give it a
beer.
full review. Go on, mate.
This is Brick Lane's Last Train Home, which is part 3 of the trilogy of Fear from last year. It's described as an oud imperial stout at 11%. So I'm going to be a bit slurry if we don't wrap this up soon.
So it's got a big straw coming out its mouth into a ball, and it just touches you on the thing.
It's got the imperial stout body that you would expect, but it is the most peppery Turkish delight beer that I have ever tasted.
You lost me.
So
someone
Sure.
tell my father. He'll be right on it.
It's so bizarre because it's candy, but it's rose water candy, the perfumed Turkish delight, and so much goddamn pepper. Like it's overwhelmingly peppercorn. It's really fucking good.
You had me at pepper, you lost me at Turkish delight.
Peter would definitely have been tempted into Narnia with his love of Turkish delight.
And the guy with the Mr. Tomness is all those weird vibes.
No, that was
that
the
guy
Willy
gave
Wonka
you with a
whistle that I was doing. I'm just getting Charlemagne mixed up.
near the
again.
dual recorder. Yeah.
Yes, last bit, special effects.
Yeah.
What you think?
I thought it
some
was
of the best
outstanding.
I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, that fight around the several times we got up close with the harvester. I thought that was great. I thought they made some really clever choices to use.
I did have to remind one of the guys I saw it with about how the shields work. Like, no. The rocket just can't go through.
I still bar up at the shot where they in the invasion of the main city and that fucking nuke that drops down and worms its way into the shield, and then you have this ship-shaped explosion. Oh, God, it just fucking gets me every time.
Well, they did that exactly the same thing with the Thopter this time.
But we're at a point, and I've been watching a lot of Corridor Crew. Yeah, I don't know why I always want to call it something else, but it's Corridor Crew. The inventiveness that they needed 20 to 40 years ago, because we're getting fucking old and some of our films are like the original Dune movie is 40 years old, somewhere in that range. Back then, to pull off the special effects required inventiveness, ingeniousness, bending the rules, inventing technology. The Star Wars movies with the rails, even for the fucking intro credits or the intro sequence, was basically a miniature train set with a camera on it. The original Dune, one of the best shots, because I recently watched the Corridor Crew comparing the old to the new Dune.
Yep.
The original shot where they had to build a 10-foot tall scaffolding and a miniature ship set with a cutout in the middle so that they could have like a 200-meter away scene of actual actors and it's seamlessly blending together. And yet these days, the special effects, like really the way that we interpret special effects today in terms of their quality did it have weight? Because it's kind of the last piece is the uncanny valley when it comes to humans, and then the weight and momentum and the feeling of is it physically there is the hardest part to capture in 3D graphics. And I think this movie absolutely nails it in terms of state of the art of what 3D graphics needs to look like in it, or special effects needs to look like in a movie, because it's seamless.
I agree.
Yeah,
That's it.
I'll back that.
Pull the pin.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know how else we could cover that. You did a pretty damn good job of that one.
Sorry,
I mean,
this is all my talking.
I think
No, that's good.
I think
Well
going to what Tom not really just like the complaint you had about the brightness and the sand. I mean, everything done in daylight, they say, is much harder. But I think because they had such a consistent palette across machinery, clothing, when you're on Dune itself, when they were on Arrakis, that they were consistent across the board with how they chose to represent colors and machinery and everything like that. So when something else came into the scene, nothing felt out of place. You could have the harvester, but it felt like it belonged there because it looked like it had been there for 1,000 years.
Until it didn't need to belong there, like the Emperor's ship, which looked so out of place.
Yeah,
it was,
but it was meant to. No, and that's what I'm saying, in a really good way.
Yes.
Like you knew it didn't belong there, and it felt like
he was an interloper to the situation, not just the planet.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's got almost like the complaint that we had about the Furiosa trailer, where it was too shiny and not dirty enough. But this was done the way we wanted that to be.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly.
That was beautiful chrome in the sky, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
As much as I think fucking our mate Denny nailed this movie, and I really do think he did.
I like him, so you two can walk around with that stick up your ass about him as long as you want.
If Denis Villeneuve walked into this room right now, I would headbutt him without hesitation.
Yeah, I think
not because of anything he's done, just because of things he said, which were wankerish.
Yeah, exactly. And then I love his.
He's very talented. Denis Villeneuve is very talented.
His attitude towards his customers, and we're seeing so many echoes in the industry right now of having that disdain and disrespect towards your customers and the impacts that it's having. I love his craft though. He's a fucking spectacular director, and I think he nailed it for this movie. I just think some of the comments are terrible, but
obviously going against someone like Schneider, obviously one either knows how to execute what he's doing, or definitely leans into the people around him and listens to.
Denis knows his content though. Like you can tell.
Yes, but I think he also listens to people.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing, but you can feel the respect for the source content in his movie, which is the complete opposite effect from fucking Snyder. What I was going to say is I also have to give mad props to a guy who I think he died 20 years ago, but Frank Herbert created an absolutely believable culture out of nothing. The whole Fremen people, the way that they live is a extreme version of anything that you would ever see on Earth. It clearly takes a lot of content from Muslim tribes in the Middle East, but he does something completely different, and he does craft that towards the story that he wants to tell in a way that he absolutely nails. And for a fucking white American guy to be doing that while on a plane that made him think he was flying over dunes, that made him think about all the sand dunes, and he wrote a book on that image alone, he just did a fucking bang up job. To me, we're only in March, but I reckon it's going to be a serious contender for movie of the year for me. I walked out of that cinema pissed off with Denis because of what a fucking great job he did in that movie.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's definitely up there, and it definitely deserves awards. I'm not denying that. As I said to you both, it's just I probably won't watch it again, and it's the same with Dune 1. Like it hasn't got that hold on me, and that's not a fault of the film. It's, to be honest, it's probably a fault on me more than anything. But the story hasn't grabbed me.
Horses and courses, man.
Yeah, it hasn't grabbed me as much as other people. And look, if you're one of those people who's going to go out and watch that every other weekend, I hope you have the fucking time of your life watching it again, because it was. I'm very glad I saw it, but I won't go to see it again. Compared to if we're shitting on Snyder, because why not? Because we've already shit on him. I regret watching Rebel Moon.
We're only a month away from the next movie.
God.
I will. So I'm waiting for my neighbor to be away on a weekend so I can watch part 1 again and fucking crank.
I definitely want to put my nice headphones on and listen to the soundtrack again, though.
Because it's one of the few movies where the soundscape really does add something to the movie that you don't get if you take that soundscape away.
Peter, you missed this question, but I know you might remember it or not. Did the gladiator fight? Do you remember if that had a soundtrack behind it or not? Had music behind the fight?
Pretty sure it did. Yeah.
We were just talking about it earlier, which you missed. That I thought for some reason I've remembered it as it goes silent, which it's one of those things that I fucking love when they do that in a film, like a really good fight scene. They just cut all music. But yeah, I was just wondering if you remembered or not.
I think it did.
We'll find out later. We'll report back in another episode. But yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be watching
no
it again.
Will care about us, but
I'll see
if you guys watch it again and don't take note of that, then
I definitely will.
Yeah. If you go and see it at the cinemas, let me know, because I will make the trek out to the Wild Wild West.
I won't be seeing it at cinemas.
Okay. Well,
I'll wait for it to come out and buy it.
Excellent. Well, I think that's us.
Yeah, just one other thing that Villeneuve mentioned was he had to make a choice whether it was going to be a Bene Gesserit story, a story about the Mentats, which don't exist in very very little in the second one.
There was no Mentat in the second film.
The Harkonnen, the guys analyzing the map, they would have been Mentats. But
yeah, okay. The one that got skull fucked by
they would have been Mentats, but there was no like Thruthwick
special treatment.
Never comes back into it, and he's back into it in the book.
I was waiting for the guy from was it Sequest DS9 or DSV? Was it the actor that was in the full motion video in the Dune game as a Mentat for Paul Atreides? Oh, he was a TV actor of the day.
Jonathan Rhys-Davies was in the game. Davies? Gimli? Is that? I always get him and
John Rhys-Davies. That's Gimli. Yeah.
He was in the game. He was the main. I don't know whether he was a Mentat, but
you named the worm Indy.
Yes, I think that is the guy that I was thinking of. Yeah. Actually, he was a lot skinnier.
Yeah.
When he was he was probably a fucking teenager in that game
30 years ago.
Because I'm pretty sure the original Dune game was one of the very first games, other than Wing Commander, that had full motion video fucking cutscenes. Yeah, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no. So just saying that's why they were missing, because Villeneuve said it had to be a Bene Gesserit story. Because they're the primary players, so he had to cut the other factions. That's
one of his
them.
favorite characters, isn't it? That's the other thing he said about that. Like, he was really regretful for having to cut it, but it made sense more for the story.
Oh, really? Yeah, I didn't hear that part, but yeah,
there's one. I'll find it and send it to you. But there's one character who's like, I really regretted cutting this character from part 2 because they're actually one of my favorites, but it made more sense story wise.
It was probably Thruthwick Highwat, yeah, the Atreides Mentat.
It's going to be cool in the next movie to see the other houses and how culturally different they are. Because there's some really cool shit in some of those other houses.
The Telelexu face dancers, they come into it in Messiah. So yeah, it's
Yeah, the TV miniseries really didn't do any of them justice.
No.
The Dune Messiah?
No, Dune was a
Or was it
3-part. Children of Dune was the 2-parter.
Children of Dune.
Yeah, so they skipped,
Son of
they
Dune,
included,
yeah.
they combined Messiah and Children of Dune.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
I think that's us.
Cool. Yep. An hour and a half. Well done.
Face dancers.
Thank you very much for listening.
Face dancers.
I think that might
leave
be
that
the
with you.
Episode title. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. We appreciate all of your support.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.